House extensions are often overlooked architecture projects, but there's something thrilling about rejuvenating and expanding an old, underused living space into something fresh, modern, and welcoming. Today's design talk, titled Adding On, Design for Domesticity, looks at the challenge of combining new with old, historic with contemporary, and considers how our living spaces can evolve over a lifetime or through generations. Instead of making do with living space that is a little too small or too dark, we hope to discuss how we can adapt the building to our needs, rather than the other way around, and perhaps achieving something creatively satisfying in the process. Today, we're very fortunate to have architect Dan Morgan and construction manager Mike Sampson of Bahal, Sampson & Dietz, leading design firm build here in Columbus. So let's just, first off, as a design build firm, how is that approach, how's that unique for you guys when you approach this type of project?
Well, we like to think of it as more of a teamwork.
If you guys just want to pass
A team-focused effort, basically from the start, the project conception, all the way through construction. We include our construction managers from early on talks before we really even conceptualize the design to try to keep project costs in check. I think that the added benefit of that is that Mike, working with the architectural staff from the beginning of the project through into construction, he has a very thorough knowledge of the project from start to finish, so that when we do go into construction and we do hit maybe a pitfall or an unforeseen condition, as we have to adjust, Mike or the construction managers having been involved from earlier on can adjust as needed while keeping the design intent intact.
Great. What about, I don't know, Mike, do you have any unique perspectives also on that?
Yeah, I think as, design build as opposed to the traditional design bid build, you just keep one project team together. So, in the beginning, the owner is working with the architect, putting all their thoughts on the table. This is what I really want, and then there's not a drop off and a new team that he has to deal with and sort of explain all those ideals again. So I think it helps in just getting their, the homeowner's vision of what they want for the space built in the end. It's one idea from the start through the finish. And, having a working relationship with the architect, we can work with them in design to try to steer, budget's always a big issue with any home remodel or addition, so we can help to steer the design towards the budget that, each homeowner's aiming towards.
Great. So what factors should a homeowner consider when undertaking a home addition? So I know there's, a lot. So, but I don't know, what are some of the basics, from size to, style, schedule, level of disruption?
The initial thought is always, we try to consider a renovation prior to an addition. If you can reimagine the space available before expanding outside of the existing building envelope, there's potential for saving costs. And then it also depends on the type of project, the type of addition. If you're going to do an addition for a living room or a room with minimal plumbing or HVAC needs, it's an easier addition. Whereas an addition for a kitchen or a bathroom or a second floor addition. So we really just try to take a step back when someone calls us and says they want to do an addition. We look at the space available and see if an addition is actually necessary.
Mm-hmm. Now, what level, I don't know, what should the homeowner expect in terms of their own sweat equity or, how their family routines are disturbed throughout the process?
Well, this is something that we do almost every project, unless we have, we're fortunate enough to have a client that might have a vacation house elsewhere, or a family house that they can go and live in during the renovation. But quite more often than not, we actually have to put together a temporary kitchen. Some of the majority of our renovation projects, I'd say, are kitchens and bathrooms, so they're very disruptive. Mm-hmm. to the family living there. Hopefully they have another bathroom that they can use, but oftentimes most homes don't have two kitchens. So what we'll do is we'll try to set up a temporary kitchen near an adjacent space, so we don't have to run plumbing too far away. And we'll reuse their existing fixtures and appliances as we can, just so that they're not completely inconvenienced while we're basically wreaking havoc in their life.
Now, Mike, do you
Mike
see? Okay, yeah, please.
So I mean, this is always, you know, it's a different challenge from project to project. Obviously, everybody has their own routine, their own needs from their home. So you know, we try to you know, go in and we'll have a meeting at the beginning of the project and just get a feel for, you know, like generally, you know, we'll want to start at 7:30. That doesn't work for everybody. You know, we'll be flexible on the start and finish time. And you know, sometimes it's necessary to stage projects. You know, so we'll go and do a project, and somebody will say, okay, you know, like here's the overall project schedule, but we really need our master bathroom, you know, in this time frame. Could we, you know, work ahead to get that done, sort of out of sequence? So you can customize the schedule and the process a little bit. But also, it's important just to get a feel for, you know, each homeowner's different in what they want their level of involvement to be. You know, some of them are pretty hands-off, and you know, if you try to run every single decision through them, it can become stressful for them. But some people love that. You know, it's like it can turn into, you know, kind of a hobby for some people, and they really enjoy the process. So you sort of need to assess their you know, their level of you know, how involved they want to be, and sort of adapt to that. So I think it just, you know, as a homeowner, if you're going into this process, it's important to express, you know, what your wants and needs are to the builder, because they will try to, you know, accommodate you in that. So it's helpful just to have those conversations up front.
Now, what are some of the obstacles in the process that you encounter? So I know we just talked about, you know, kind of your day-to-day living needs, but more in terms of maybe zoning limitations or lot size, or, you know, or just some common pitfalls.
Those are all very good. We tried, you know, the design team from the get-go should start before they really after they have that preliminary conversation about the project, before they start getting too involved in design, do that research and find the zoning restrictions to make sure that the building will fit in the buildable area of the lot. There are variances. You can get like zoning variances depending on which jurisdiction you're in, which will allow you to change the buildable area of your lot. As always, depending on the schedule, that's a 3 to 6 month process sometimes, depending on your jurisdiction, to get a zoning variance. We try to avoid that at any, if we can, but sometimes you can't avoid it. Setbacks, zoning. The other kind of unforeseen conditions are the buried utilities. Mm-hmm. Having OOPS come out and mark that, and even going a step further and calling and seeing if you can get some of the earlier drawings for the development you're in, so you know where major utilities are located. And also your adjacency to neighboring buildings and your own building, so that when you are digging a foundation, you're not undermining the foundation of your house. I think that one project comes to mind where the brick wall sheared off the house, so that you need to do your due diligence on the front end for project planning. Mike might have a bit more to offer on this.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, by the time it hits the field, if it's gone through the architectural process, usually, you know, we're not too concerned about zoning issues. You know, if we can see on the plan going into it if we're going to be close, and we'll have to, you know, close to a property line or anything like that. So we'll have to be careful in staking it out, you know, just to, you know, double and triple check that we don't extend into that zoning area. But as you know, as far as surprises, as you go into a project, it's sort of you know, if you're working in newer homes and renovating them, you've got a better idea of what's, you know, behind the walls when you open them up. You can sort of see it. You know, they built them 20 years ago, similar to how we build them now. So there are less surprises going into a renovation of a newer home. You know, some of the older German village homes. You know, some older homes just throughout Columbus. You know, so you'll open up walls and, you know, find just funny structural things that you don't really anticipate because you're not allowed to build it like that now. So, you know, I think older homes, just there's some inherent surprises in them, but, you know, it's nothing you can't work through. You just got it. It might be a couple days setback just to figure out what you need to do and move forward.
Now, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll have questions at the end, please. Thank you. Okay, now.
I think, adding on to the tail end of Mike's comments, I think that kind of brings to light the important relationship that you need to have with the clients while you're undertaking a renovation project, is the ability to be a little bit flexible for when those unforeseen conditions become found. Mm-hmm. So you can adjust and adapt as needed.
Now, do you guys see, you know, trends with these projects? I don't know. So, I mean, in terms of are there, you know, special function rooms or home offices, in-law suites? What are you currently seeing now?
You know, I think it's been a trend for a long time, but, you know, people are wanting more open spaces, and you know, that's when we go into renovations or additions, that's always, you know, one of the big focuses, especially for a living space like a kitchen or something like that. But you know, as far as trends, yeah, I don't know, maybe Dan can speak a little better to that.
It really, there's kind of, it runs the whole gamut of project types that have been coming up recently this summer, I'd say. Mm-hmm. Less so much as a home office, but maybe more, you know, with the ability to be able to, with wireless and iPads and your computers becoming much more smaller, really any room in the house, any area in the house can become that second office or that place to get caught up on your email or if you have to work at the end of the day. So we typically, or what we've been seeing more of actually, is off of the main public space is maybe a desk or an area that can be tucked away cleanly. Mm-hmm. Largely, it's opening up. Like the first thing people usually, I want to remodel my kitchen, and I want to open it to the living room or to the family room or to the dining room, or all, like in some of these pictures, all of the above. So it's mm-hmm. more an open style, entertaining type living environment.
Okay, so and you touched on like home automation to a certain degree. Home automation, I mean, just in terms of now controlling, you know, the environment of your house right. through technology.
And that kind of comes, it depends largely on the client.
Okay.
Some people are very happy to, you know, they say, well, I've got my iPad and I love the idea that I can turn the lights on from my car, from my office, or from 5,000 mm-hmm. feet in the air. But what I've been finding more frequently is people, they like the simplicity of it, but when they get into the idea of having complete home automation, it's a little befuddling. Whereas the convenience controls are the big part of it. Your automatic window shades. The Nest thermostat system is mm-hmm. a hot topic that people are talking about. One-touch lighting scenario, so that when you come home, you open your garage door, you have a lighted path to whether it's your master suite or to the kitchen. But as far as full home automation, I haven't personally been involved in any of that. Mike may have been.
Yeah, I think if you're going to use a system like a Crestron system or something like that, once you get over the hurdle of figuring out how to, operate everything, because it's just a little bit different from, how you normally would with switches and everything. There are still switches on the walls, but I went into one recently and I was surprised to find that there's actually less electrical wiring required, that it costs less to run the electric for all the devices in the renovation. Because, if there's a three-way switch for a light, you don't need to run power both ways. You only have to run power to one switch, and then everything else is controlled wirelessly. So, I think from that experience, it seemed like, I think that home automation is something that in the future, it's even now, it's something that isn't overly invasive to implement into your house, and because all they really need to do is switch out the devices and control everything wirelessly, so you don't need to rewire your whole house.
Now, what about increased accessibility? How can that affect the existing house?
Actually, Mike and I are actually working on a project where that's the sole nature of the project is increased accessibility. Largely, it's widening residential doors. Most residential doors, once you're in the house, are quite narrow, 2'6".
Mm-hmm.
So we need to increase those for wheelchair access. Vanities and countertops, so you can have knee space. So like retrofitting. Elevators, we've been, several elevators have been requested as a retrofit and additions. And there's several different options, but they're actually pretty reasonably priced. And then handrails and zero threshold showers are a big one. And that comes into the planning to make sure that you can do that, cutting into the floor joist to make that zero threshold, or adding in structural. So it's important to have good consultants on board, that someone you can call and talk to quickly, and have a quick conversation about what the structural ramifications are of making these changes.
Now, so this might be a little bit more subjective to how you guys feel, but how does one building affect the meaning of another when their expressions are combined and interact? So more specifically, how should they affect each other, like when one is protected under a public interest, let's say a neighborhood association or something, or a historic district? How do you guys approach that?
I think there's two schools of thought on that. I mean, there's probably more, but at least at the tip of my tongue, there's two. When we go into an addition of a home, depending on the style of the home, our idea of a good addition is one that looks like it's been there forever. So try to blend with the architecture, blend with the detailing, blend with the level of craftsmanship in the level of cabinetry, built-ins, casings, moldings. And the other school of thought is, make it look like a modern addition, and maybe pick up on cues of the original house or the original structure, and do something with a bit of a different twist. Which is, I think you're leaning towards like German Village Commission and Italian Village Commission. They're trying to think of. We've done. I think one of these homes. Well, this project's in German Village, and then there's another one that's in German Village as well, and we were able to carefully add on with a slightly different but similar. This was all an addition here at German Village, from the glass hyphen to the board and batten 2-story element. So depending on the locality, they come strapped with certain restrictions of what they expect. And they typically fall back to the Secretary of the Interior's yada, yada, yada.
Now, so what challenges does that arise, like during construction or with materials?
Of like meeting with new.
Yeah.
You just need to be cognizant and careful of how you purchase your materials. You need to know if you're going into a neighborhood where you're required to, install wood windows. That could be a big trip up if you go in and estimate the project with clad windows, and then, you go to buy them and you find out you need wood windows with true divided light and, a custom size. So it's very important to do your research up front just to know, because, a lot of those products aren't they're trying to stay with, with the community, with what's in place, and have a historic look. So it might not be the window you put in on every project or on most of your projects. So, I think it's just doing your research ahead of time and working with the design team to understand, what you need to do to comply with the zoning or the commissions.
So have you ever had a project where the difference then is an advantage, to the context? Maybe not how it's dressed stylistically, maybe it's something more with how it operates in plan with the new versus the old, or how can you use the new addition, as a positive against what's already there? And more than just additional space or, increased function.
I think it becomes very project specific. It's difficult to answer that. I think I have a project under construction right now, and the jury's still out on whether it's successful or not, whether the modern addition is a successful addition to the historical home. But I think the addition, in some homes, it makes sense to do an addition, modern or traditional addition, of where you want a larger open space, but the existing structure of the home isn't being cooperative as far as providing an open floor plan. So sometimes it makes sense to have a small connector piece or an addition off the back or the side, where you can actually start to do a different type of architecture. It could become more open, more, have that gathering kitchen, larger great room, or even a master suite addition where you want to have larger rooms. They won't fit necessarily in the cottage of a German village home. And then it becomes, just like Mike said earlier, it's all in the detailing of the connections between the old and the new. And then a lot of that, at least in our work, our architectural style is our client's style. And we try to learn from them as much as we hope they learn from us, and take their taste and take it to the next level and make it really nice.
Okay, so are there some questions you'd like to ask these guys?
It would be out of context now.
Yeah.
Approach a project, you've got to get some money for some design fees up front after you've had your initial.
I think that's a good question. It fluctuates. The way, not to give us too much of a stump speech, but we set up our projects, and we actually have a preliminary proposal for conceptual design, so that we set up a fee for that, and we negotiate it with the client and say, well, and here's what we understand your program to be. This is what we understand the context, and here's a fee that we expect to incur for coming up with a concept. And then I think as far as the number of concepts, it really depends on the project. Sometimes right off the bat, you look at a space and you can immediately have 3 or 4 different ideas for it. And sometimes it's not great to bring all 4 of those to that first meeting. Sometimes it gets whittled down to 2. I've had meetings where I've had 5 different concepts, preliminary. They're very, very conceptual, very, mostly a floor plan, maybe a quick elevation sketch, just to get the wheels flowing. because it's kind of two sides to it. Sometimes a client will come to you and they have a great idea of what they want to do. Other times they'll say, well, I just need more space. I want a big kitchen, or I want a big great room because I have, I don't need many bedrooms. My kids all left, but I host everybody for the holidays. So I need a big gathering space, but I don't know where to begin. So that's when you have to kind of end up investing more time in those conceptual design concepts. Does that answer your question?
You will need to make adjustments, and then you might make a field revision down the road. So at the end, you might actually do like 5, 6 different kind of versions of the design that may be very different from the previous one, or can be very similar. Refine. I don't know how you guys are. I mean, did you go through?
We go through numerous. We'll usually in that first kind of conceptual design phase, we break it out. We call it phase 1. We'll have 2 to 3 meetings depending on the size of the project and how fruitful those meetings are. Some clients are easier to work with than others, and they can make up their mind like, I like this. Others will ask you to do multiple iterations of it. What we like to do, or at least what I like to do, is come to a meeting with several concepts, and sometimes one of those concepts is a home run. Other times, well, I like part of this, and I like part of that, and I like part of the third option, and have we thought of this? And then we'll have another meeting in a week or 2 where we can work out those other concepts. But try to get, show all our cards early on and kind of steer the project that way.
And then, or go back to your clients, like, you don't need the addition to do this, and, I was wondering, or is it more kind of client-driven, where you're kind of talking to them and seeing, kind of meeting kind of their benchmark thinking?
It kind of stems back to the idea of really understanding their goals for the project. If their goal is, I want to do an addition because I want to make my house bigger, then clearly they're not going to be happy if you come to them and say, well, you don't need to do an addition. We just need to take this wall down and you can have a great living room. But as far actually another project Mike and I worked on, we went round and round with conceptual design. And towards the tail end of it, we said, well, let's flip the addition and we'll build a garage, and we'll take your existing garage and we'll make that your new kitchen and dining room. And the garage is cheaper to build than a new kitchen, addition-wise. So I think that through successfully talking to them and looking at their house and evaluating their program, we were able to hit their goals from an architectural standpoint, and also from we didn't end up building that one, but also from more of a budgeting standpoint as well. So it's not my goal to go into a meeting and be bullish and say, well, you're silly, you don't need to do an addition. But it's really coming down to understanding what they mean as opposed to what they say.
I have 2 questions, actually. The first is, a lot of clients, when they're considering additions, they're also considering just moving. So
Correct.
how do you coach them through,
Sometimes there's several different ways that I've experienced with this very exact problem. First one is after the initial meeting, we say, hey, we're thinking about moving, or we're thinking about doing a project. Can you come and talk to us? So you walk through the project with them and they say, well, these are our needs, these are our goals for the project. Do you think we can do that? And so in our proposal, when we do those types of interviews, for our proposal, we'll kind of outline what we think needs to be done. And this is the benefit of being design build, is we can take a pretty good stab at a kind of a ballpark range of cost in after that initial meeting. So sometimes they'll get that initial proposal, they'll see what we think the range of construction cost will be, and they'll call us up and say, well, thanks for your time, but we decided we're just going to sell this house and buy a ranch somewhere else. We might call you. The hope is that they'll call you for renovating that place too. The second, I lost track. The second one is they're still curious after that first proposal. And you do a schematic design, conceptual design, and we close out our phase. We always close out our phase one with a detailed budget estimate as part of our services. And sometimes it's at that point. So it'll be after a month or two of working together as a team to come up with a great solution for their problem. And then once they, either they'll see someone come up in the market that fits their needs specifically. We designed a whole house for a guy, and probably maybe a month or two before construction started, he said, "Oh, I found a house that has exactly what I want. I'm going to buy that instead." And so those are like the two main times, or two main things that happen, I guess.
My other question was, you talked before about in older homes, opening up the walls and coming across something unforeseen.
Mm-hmm.
How do you address like contingencies, and does it vary based on the age of the house?
Well, I'm going to let Mike talk about this one.
I think with that, I mean, we can, we'll go through the house and do, pretty thorough walkthrough and, check things out as much as we can, without, punching a hole in the wall before we know we have the job and they want to do the work, So, a lot of times we can see a house and, okay, I know there's going to be lead paint in here. Ask the homeowner permission to do a little test. They're not very invasive. Or, you can see asbestos wrap. Or, you go down in the basement and you can see sort of a crumbly structural masonry wall or something. Areas where, you might have a problem. And we like to just address those, and we in the budget, we can set up an allowance, so that's just sort of like, okay, we saw this, we're a little concerned about it, if we run across this problem, we're going to have to deal with it. We think it'll cost about this much. If we don't, it's not a part of the contract. We don't bill you for it, But, that being said, there are always things you're going to find. I mean, not always, but, from project to project, there's a thing or two that, whether you're digging a foundation, an unknown underground, or, an unknown behind a wall, we tell our guys just as soon as you see it, stop, call us. We'll we'll talk to the homeowners about it, and, we try to be proactive and make a plan with the homeowner involved, prior to jumping in and trying to do it, and then, we won't just do it and send you a bill for it. You'll know what's happening, and, we'll work through the problem together.
How do clients typically finance their construction projects, and are your design and management services typically wrapped into the financing, or does it come out of pocket?
We keep the architectural fees and the construction management fees separate. We keep the cost of the design and the construction documents and the permitting. We try to keep it separate. Construction management is we keep that in the construction as a line item in the construction the contract for construction. As far as financing, it depends on the scale of the project, and it also depends on the client. Architectural fees are sadly not all that expensive. So most people pay architectural fees out of pocket. Construction fees, it varies. Some individuals they'll work with their banks and do financing that way. Others will pay out of pocket. It's really it's a personal decision.
As far as just splitting breaking the management fees away from the actual construction project, we found that generally when banks finance a project, they see that as a part of the construction cost, and they don't have an issue with it. Where we run into issues with that is with insurance claim projects. A lot of insurance companies, won't see that as a reimbursable, service. So we'll run into that issue sometimes working with insurance companies.
Design to the budget, and how do you build within it? I know it's a tough question.
Well, I think we're sort of, as builders, we're lucky that we get to be involved from the design phase moving forward. So, Dan was talking about early on, we have sort of a conceptual phase, and we will put a budget together based on that. And I think that's a huge service to the client, because they don't have to put a ton of hours into developing a plan to find out maybe it doesn't fit their budget. So we'll know pretty early on if we need to make some adjustments in design, and change the scope, or go for a different line of appliances, or whatever it might be. But then once it hits the job site, once we're out in the field, I think it's understanding the full scope of the work, and it's easier to do because we've been involved from the throughout the design process, and just being as honest and forthcoming as you can in the initial estimate for the project. Just you gotta call it sort of how you see it, and work through it. Obviously you're trying to drive the budget down, and there are things you can do. A lot of times, we will put a budget together, and if we think it's over, what the client is looking for, we'll give them options of things they can do to sort of build within their budget.
I think that's the benefit, the design build benefit, the benefit of design build, and working the way that, or at least our brand of design build, is having that initial, right off the bat, with from starting the projects to within a month, we'll have a schematic plan and a pretty thorough cost estimate, which actually going back to the financing question earlier, it works out great, because oftentimes that initial conceptual plan along with a thorough cost estimate is more often than enough, that's enough for somebody to go out and secure a loan. But that way, knowing early on where we are and holding that as kind of the goal of the budget for the project, we find that it's actually, I don't think it's a limiting factor. I think it's freeing, because having had conversations with the client, having conversations with the guy who's doing the estimating in construction, you already have that freedom with it to work within.
Okay, well, I want to thank Mike and Dan for coming down to the center today and providing their insight.